Good morning. Hey, can you hear me? Is that better? Okay, cool. Uh, this is going to be fun. I don't think I've ever stayed up the night before writing a talk. Um, it is unusual for me because I'm usually pathologically overprepared because I have stage fright so badly. So it's usually like a month before, I'm done. And this time, this is actually going to be the first time that I ever give a talk that's kind of about what we're doing. And I hate vendors. I am now a vendor. So like the threading of the needle between talking about the stuff that's like the future and exciting and where the world is going, and just like not wanting to say anything that like makes anyone irritated at me for being a vendor has just been like fucking with my head. Anyway, I think it's gonna be fun. But you're welcome to like punch me gently if you don't like it. Anyway, the fake title is, this is the obligatory monitoring keynote, because I feel like every single conf I've ever been to has had to have one. And it's like, basically, monitor everything, if it moves, graph it, like all the old hits. And they're good ones. They're good ones. We've heard all this before. But plot twist, I hate monitoring, like a lot. It is my least favorite thing to do in engineering, and it always has been. I like backups more than I like monitoring, which is why it's kind of funny that I've now co-founded a company that is founded to do monitoring type things. But I would like to assure you that this is a company that's founded out of hatred and loathing. No joy, except in the idea that I might never have to do this again if I do it right this time. He gave my intro. But yeah, Honeycomb is honeycomb.io. We're building like next generation observability framework, not because we wanted to, because nobody else is doing it. Yeah, I worked at Second Life. I worked at Parse. Best experience of my life. I loved Parse. Rest in peace. They shut it down last week. I don't know if you guys noticed. And Facebook. And Facebook's where I ran Scuba and realized that there was a better way. And I will never go back to the old ways. So what is observability anyway? Well, from control theory, it is how well you can measure the internal states of a piece of software by knowledge of the external outputs. And it's basically the flip side of controllability, which is sort of interesting. I kind of think of it as everything around, so like you talk about monitoring and you're like, okay, these are alerts that are paging us. These are thresholds that we've set. This is what's going to bug us in the middle of the night, you know? There's also instrumentation. There's also, there's instrumenting your software. There's also like, diving deep into performance to your database internals. But the end goal of all of this, I think, is to help us ask questions. And traditional monitoring, especially in the operations space, does not do that. The way that I grew up doing monitoring and system stuff was very simple. Build a system, look at it, try to predict how it's going to break, and write some monitoring checks for those things. This is terrible. This is so bad. It was okay when we had a lamp stack. Cool, database queue size, some performance metrics, whatever. But like, I can't predict how this stuff's going to fail. Nobody can. And we knew it. So we're just like, okay, well, it evolves over time. Every outage creates another dashboard. Oh, a year's gone by. Now we should make some dashboards for our dashboards, Oh, well, everybody has their own unique dashboard to navigate all the dashboards that they got. And like, why did we make that monitoring check? I don't know. At some point when that thing being high, it was bad. It was very bad. Nobody commented? Well, let's delete it and see what happens. It's terrible. And when you're building software this way, when you're building like actionable alerts this way, you're always debugging by intuition and luck. This is not data-driven. It's not even close. We don't even pretend it is, right? This is why, if you start thinking about it, there are so many things that this explains, right? This is why senior engineers are like gods, or not even seniority. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not the world's best engineer. I'm okay, but I'm not the world's best. But because I tend to go into a place early, I have most of it in my head. And better engineers come along later, and I am still the best debugger. Not because I'm the best debugger, but because we have the worst tools. And dashboards are not a debugging tool. They're a status display. right? They're fixed. You can't tweak them. You can't ask them a new question. You can make another dashboard, but that's not the same thing. Yeah, what we really want to know is what's happening right now, and what's happened recently, and why should we care? So the world has changed a lot, right? And I was giving talks last year about just the insane difference in architecture choices between, when I was building Parse. It was like, okay, there's some best practices. I'm going to run on AWS. I'm going to run MySQL for the data they really care about. I'm going to run Mongo for the data that I don't. I'm going to run Redis for cache. It was like, I could pretty much just, there are obvious answers. 2016, right? Went to start a new company and kind of like nonchalantly thought that I would feel the same way. And no, I did not. It was like, do I want to use containers? Do I want to use schedulers? Do I want to use AWS? Do I want to use autoscaling groups? Do I want to use Terraform? Do I want to use CloudFormation? Do I want to use any of the wrappers in Ruby or Python for either of those things? It's just like the questions are infinite, and there really isn't a whole lot of best practices from trusted voices. Because vendors are not trusted voices, ever. That includes me. Servers, the entire concept of a server from monitoring's point of view should just be completely nuked from space. The questions that we want to be asking are not things like, is the load high, right? For a mature system, you don't want to be paging on symptoms, ever. Paging on a symptom, even tracking a symptom is almost a sign that you failed. It's kind of an admission of, it's the best we've got for now. The kinds of questions that we want to be asking, that we want to be spending our precious engineering time on, are the new ones. You ever see people who are just like getting paged, you're like, yep, oh that, oh I know what this was. I just want to like smack the phone out of their hands. Like that's a crisis. It is such a crisis to be interrupted. Like, do you not value your life? Like the days that you spend on this earth? I hate getting paged about things that are already understood. But if you're successful enough to have more and better classes of problems, you do have questions like this. Or like, what's one of the hardest problems in distributed systems? Everything's getting a little bit slower. Why? Especially when it has calls that call back into itself and don't always hit the same code paths. Right? That shit's fun. Yeah, so you want to have the second kind, right? And we need to have tools that let us answer these. At Parse, we would, Parse is still on my mind because I just shut it down. It's probably super annoying. We'd have 100,000 requests per second. And every day or two, someone would come up to us and be like, this person says Parse is down. I'd be like, Parse is not down. I have a wall full of beautiful graphs that tells me how very much Parse is not down. Maybe this app is doing 8 requests a second. But they don't care how much I know Parse is not down, right? And in fact, every moment that I am disagreeing with them, contradicting them, I'm losing credibility in their eyes. Maybe it's Disney, so maybe we actually do have to care. Now, maybe they forgot to turn on their Wi-Fi. This happens a lot. But I should be able to tell if they're hitting my edge right away, right? And if they are, maybe their login endpoint had 1,000 objects in it. It's doing a full table scan, and it just went to 1,001, and so it's actually timing out every single time. Well, these are the kinds of problems that I want to be able to solve. And complexity is being driven on by pretty much every trend in our industry today. I think of the LAMP stack as being the yeah, that was tractable by human beings. But if you're using microservices, if you're using distributed systems, polyglot persistence, anytime you're dealing with, I come from the database world, right? Anytime you're dealing with multiple databases, you have a lot of complexity. This is why we always used to say only use one. And that was really good advice. It still is, if you can get away with it. You shouldn't be running Postgres and MySQL, almost certainly. But technology has gotten better. We can solve better and harder problems with different databases now. High security needs, hypergrowth, containers. So let's take a step back and look at all of the different ways that we're kind of stabbing at this element. There are three main ways, and they are the APM, metrics, and log aggregation. APM is basically what software engineers get, your new relics. And it tends to be very easy to get started, but then you have a golden path and you cannot deviate, or they make it extremely hard to get new information out. OPSI metrics, I feel like this entire model of time series rollups, I bet that Datadog is going to be the last that ever really does that. It's not event-based. We took a big detour in debugging terms in systems land a few years ago when we decided to stop using events. And I get why we did it, right? Compute was really expensive, and RAM was just unbelievably expensive. And so we do these bucketing, with the aggregates. We do the ticks, we do the counters, we do all these things. And it's a crutch. And it's not a good one. It makes it really, really hard to debug because you don't have most of the context. Most of the context of anything that happens has been stripped away from you. Yeah, and it's usually unfriendly to humans, but that's not really the data's fault. It's our fault. And then you have log aggregators. Splunk, obviously, is the owner. It cracks me up that the leading one in the open source side is based on Elasticsearch. I just can't. OK, that's fine. Everything's fine. It tends to be really expensive, though, because you have to store the original raw results in case you unpacked it incorrectly. And then you have to store it, in a few different places. You have to store the structured data that you've gotten out of it. Then you have to do replication. Then you have to do indexes. You have to pick indexes, which is in advance, which is far and away the most unfortunate thing about this model. Because if you don't have an index in the thing you wanted to search, you're just doing grep. Sucks. And indexes are expensive and write heavy. So each of these categories brings something really interesting. But they're all kind of seeing a part of the puzzle, and it doesn't really cohere to a whole very well. And every single one of them adds yet another source of truth. Oh my God, I swear to God that the only reason that DevOps, the movement exists is because everyone uses different tools. It's like, I've got my silo over here that uses New Relic. You've got your silo over there that uses Splunk. And we're going to actually spend most of our time just agreeing over whose tool is right. Do you guys see this? So unfortunate. In the glorious future, I do believe we will be able to fix that a little bit. So I've been spending the last year thinking about pretty much nothing other than observability, problems, and the future. And I kind of want to tell you where I think we're going and what's going to win. And I don't mean in terms of individual tools. I mean, these are the characteristics that are shared by the things that are winning for the ways that they're winning. And I think that, I don't think people should, no more tools unless you have to, right? But when you're thinking about how to use your tools, how to reuse them, how to build them, I think that these should be more widely understood. And first, I'm going to taunt you a little bit with my vision of the future. I believe that not too long from now, we can get paged an order of magnitude less, at least. And never page on symptoms, only on the health of the service. Only when the engineering pain is aligned with your customer pain. No engineer is getting woken up if no customer is hurting. In fact, I think that on-call can be something that doesn't impact people's lives, that you don't have to plan around. You can go skiing, when you're on call, if you can tether within 15 minutes or so. In fact, I think that people should be begging to be on call. And I've seen this happen. I think that software engineers are going to want to take the pager. If we can connect the dots and make them understand that this is what gives them superpowers, that this is what gets them promoted, that this is what gets that intuition, that subtlety, that spark of creativity that happens when you're close to the customers and when you're close to what's really happening. This is what, at a visceral level, this is what builds good judgment and intuition. I think that to do this, we need to only page ourselves on end-to-end checks, like critical end-to-end checks that exercise the core code paths, and that align to our KPIs. I think we have to be okay with graceful degradation and choose our battles wisely, we have to have way fewer dashboards. And then we have to have the debugging tools that we are confident in, so that when those complicated questions come up, we know that we can slice and dice and have confidence. We'll find the answer in seconds to minutes, like every single time. They're black swans, right? I mean, you get to a certain level, and it's like, you're not going to get paged when one thing goes wrong. It has to be 1, 2, 3, 4 things. That's a well-designed system. It's also pretty much impossible to debug with the kinds of things that we have now, which is where parse lies. But we need some things from our tools in order to get here. And that last one is what Honeycomb is working on, the exploring in real time. So here's what we need. We have to have raw events. There is definitely a place for ticks and counters and rollups. But aggregates are only valuable in the aggregate. And we tend to trust them, and we think that they're saying more than they are. Structured data. No more unstructured logs. Just stop. JSON, something only. Like it saves so much work and effort, and the precision and the accuracy is so much better for so little effort. I think that if there's one thing that I would say, take this home with you. Please take that home. Structured only. It's so important. And these are because I believe that the next generation of tools that are being built, it's not just us, it's a bunch of people, rely on structured logs, and the work that you do now will make it way easier to adopt them. I think that you'd be surprised how many people do not understand how to structure an event at all, or how to manage events, or how to make this part of your code review process. This is a skill. It's going to take us a while to build back up. And let's start. New tools need to be software engineer friendly. I totally believe that. The future is software engineers largely owning their own services from end to end. Ops, DBAs, we aren't going away, but we're on the other side of an API, right? Good fences make good neighbors. This is where SaaSes are really nice. If you can guarantee that whatever the software engineers are doing, it's not going to be destructive to the production system, that's cool. If you can have native SDKs in the languages that they're developing in, so that adding or changing a metric is as easy and as costless as changing a comment, that's the goal, right? Like we've been saying for a couple years, yeah, developers own their own systems, but at the same time, most of what we had to offer them was, here, go learn Graphite, and Chef, and AWS, and auto-scaling groups, and all this stuff. And now that's actually not a reasonable thing to ask. It's just not. In certain circumstances, sure, but they're exceptional developers and they're exceptional circumstances. We're not going for the best engineers in the world here. We're going for your median level support people, right? It needs to be that easy for people to adopt new things. Yeah. And social support. Debugging is a social activity. It just is. And we don't treat it that way. Even if it's just you, you're still collaborating with past and future versions of yourself. You still need to do a lot of the same things, right? Like leaving breadcrumbs for yourself, if your memory is anything like mine. My past me was drunk and it was 4 a.m. Like, what were they thinking? It's the dumbest person on the team. And it's amazing to me how many of our tools assume that you are just sitting alone. We've started to get Slack integrations. Slack integrations are great. But discovering new things, debugging new things is so cognitively expensive that we should really try and make it easier to share, easier to branch off of each other's work, easier to be intuitive. Consumer quality developer tools, it turns out that engineers are people, subject to the same biases and the same failures. And yet we don't make nice things for ourselves. Those are the big three. In the future, more of us are platforms, and so I think learning to treat users that way is a good thing. High cardinality data sets, surprisingly important. And database queries. Look, in the future, all of us are DBAs. This is a trend that's been going on for a little while, and I think it's great. I love databases. Not everyone does. But databases are so great because it's like, never mind, sorry, I won't go off my, my nerdery about that. But database queries need to be a first-class citizen, right? We cannot, so many engineers are actually terrified of databases. And I understand. They're like, mistakes are so permanent. I'm like, yes, that's what makes it fun. I mean, come on, networks, packets, they're just going to drop a few and come right back. Doesn't even matter what you do. I think that looking for ways to integrate your data debugging and your regular like software and stuff is going to be, it's going to make both things more powerful. You know, anytime that you can integrate the way things are counted instead of having two different things counting it from different directions, it's just going to be easier. So, yeah, the the trend is complexity, a ton of it. The solution is observability and tools for exploration. I think that having confidence in your explorability tools is like the ultimate security blanket. And that's why I think that we can turn the crappy monitoring Keynote into a love story about observability in our systems. And there's some of my favorite links for you. That's it. I was rushing a little because of the late start, but I think we have time for questions. If anyone has any. No? All your monitoring stuff is just solved? Really? Come on. Yeah.
So you were talking about sort of the like social debugging
Yeah.
aspect. That sounds sort of amazing. I'm curious, like, where you think that's going.
Yeah, absolutely. So the things that we're building in Honeycomb that I think are most important, and the question was social debugging. What are features around that? Context is huge. I don't want to see an answer unless I can see how they got there. You know, I want to see the whole trail from I know nothing to I know everything. With branches, you know, what did they try? What was not wrong? You know, that's amazing. And then being able to do interesting things with that context, like, you know, if you have a Jira task, being able to go start and stop. Cool. Now, anyone who encounters anything like that problem before can go back and see how you debugged it. Snippets for postmortems, like a little shared, like pinboard type thing for postmortems, where you're all just like putting your stuff. Here's how I found it. Here was my view of that. Here's how it impacted me, and this was my early warning alarm. And then you just like archive it and save it with some tags. Like this is the same stuff that I've always done with Word documents or like text pads or whatever. And then when something that sort of smells like it happens again, you just go straight there and look at the cookie crumbs that you did before. I think that also like having like a pseudo type role for vendors so that you can go see exactly what they did while they were working on your systems is awesome. I think that there's a bunch of stuff around this. I think that having data sets that are when everything's very open-ended, when there's a giant blank screen that you're faced with, curation becomes incredibly important. I've been doing this with Mongo and my SQL data sets, Get 2 or 3 really rich queries that jump you right into the thick of things so that you can tweak. And I think that this is going to be really powerful for support people. So, So, everybody wants to know what's going on. Like, having data, knowing what people are doing is we're really snoopy. As humans, we're so interested in what they're doing over there, And if you can find a way to kind of harness that for good, right? If we all just wanted to have a window up there refreshing with what everyone is doing when they're looking at data, it's kind of like a heat map for what's interesting about the systems. When is there a problem? And when should I dive in? I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to do there. And yes, this is what we're doing with Honeycomb, but you all should be doing it. I'm trying to get people interested because I think this is so cool. We're all kind of dumb on our own, and we're really smart with other people, so let's be smart. Cool. Thanks, guys.